If you want to tell us about your early days before you got to Leicester.
Grew up in South London, Camberwell, Oval, Brixton. Cut long story short, so into music as a kid. Ended up working in a record shop at 13 years old. I used to go and hassle these guys. They had a shop on the Brixton Road near the Oval, and ended up working for them. And they were effectively friends of Chris Blackwell, who owned Island Records at the time. So it just opened so many doors for me just to go to gigs. And I had to get a little note from my mum so I could work there. I was paid in pocket money and import records. So the music was my scene. Next door to us was a little butcher shop, and above there was Invicta Radio, where all the big sort of pirate DJs started. And we had a recording studio downstairs. Bands like Direct Drive, Oval Records started there, and it was Paul Hardcastle that started there, and all kinds. So it was a real seeding ground for me. And then around about 19, I managed to get my A-levels, just about. And I came to Leicester, went to Leicester Poly, which is now De Montfort Uni. And as soon as I got there, hooked up with a guy called Neil Mather, who was the social sec, and we got talking.
What year was that?
That was 1982, sorry. 1982 I arrived here. And I met two sets of people. There was people that were into the sort of student thing. And then through Neil, I started DJing really as a student DJ, but I also hooked up with some people who ran what was the Leicester Poly Jazz Funk Society. And they used to organise trips to all dayers, we organised gigs. We used to do stuff like Level 42 and bands like that, sort of the jazz funk bands of that era. We used to hire them and book them and play. And
What was the jazz scene like when you arrived?
I wasn't, because I was a student, it was very difficult to get into the town thing. That came a couple of years later when I was more of an established DJ. There wasn't a great deal that I knew of going on, if truth be told, but there wasn't the incentive for me to go out there and look for it. And that's how I came to meet the boys that then became, well, Derek anyway, and Kim, who became Classic Groove. And they used to come to the old days and became really good friends and have known them for 30 odd years now. From the student thing, I was DJing about 4 nights a week, a lot of bands, the whole history of 80s music. I think I worked practically every band you could think of, from Frankie Goes to Hollywood to God knows who else, on the DJing front. But then I had to have my own vibe, because basically when I was based in London, I was part of the whole jazz scene, as in the jazz dance scene, which included Paul Murphy and all the little crews like Giles Peterson's crew and Kev Beale's crew and Patrick Ford's crew. And we used to go to places like Soli Sombra and the Electric Ballroom in London. And I moved away, and for me it was like a cultural black hole. I thought, where have I come? Everyone goes out at 8 o'clock and comes home at midnight, and at midnight I'm just going out. You know, so it was very difficult to adjust to that whole vibe, but I adjusted. And a couple of years into DJing at Poly, I thought, well, we had our little jazz funk society. Then I started my own little sort of jazz trendy society called the Bastille with 2 friends of mine, the 2 Chris's I called them. And we started putting on gigs, which included stuff like this. This is a very old poster with lecture set called Jazz Extravaganza. This must have been about 84. Or thereabouts. Had a few people from town come down. One of the first events that I can remember on a sort of jazz tip, and playing all kinds. It was mostly retro stuff, because there was no people really producing new music. That came a little bit later with the whole launch of the acid jazz scene. And really, from that sort of period, then I was able to go out into town. I was asked to do stuff in town, so did some nights, student nights. But I was able to do my own night as well. The Prohibition, for instance, remember that place, which is on, I think it's Revolution now in New Walk, or along from there. It's one of those places anyway. It's along from Revolution. Prohibition, and then a place called Viceroy's really was the start. I had a night called the Jazz Basement. And then that appealed to such a wide spectrum of people. It appealed to the student crowd. It appealed to what I would call the middle class crowd. They used to come down to hear jazz. Had a lot of the jazz dancers come down, and those sort of days like, from what I can remember, from that period, people like Norman Spence, Tarek, Martin Brotherton, all the sort of soul boys used to come down and see me. Then I had a lot of student-y crowd, and a lot of people that really were what would I say, sort of semi-professional crowd in Leicester to come down. So it was a real hodgepodge, and it was a nice big melting pot of people, which is great. And a lot of the old soul boys come down here, a lot of the old soul, and so it was a really nice period for me. Jazz Basement at Viceroy's, then I moved it to the Secret Jazz Company, which opened. Actually, if I can find a flyer from that. Secret Jazz it was called, and it was now what is Mosh. Before that it was Mosquito Coast, and before that it was the Secret Jazz Company. And I used to do a lot of things, a couple of nights during the week. With a live band, which is always important to me to have live music. And a live band and good music, really, and that's my benchmark, is try and keep it quality.
Were these bands from Leicester, or these jazz bands? Or?
The Midlands, we had a few sort of London artists, a couple of international artists, but it was the beginning of everything, really, more than anything else. Then the Secret Jazz closed, then I was doing, but parallel to that, I was doing stuff at Helsinki. I had a night called the Greenwich Village, and then I had a night called Calling All Cats, which is sort of jazz tone. Or you cats, or whatever. It's very pretentious, I know. And then we had, then I started a night called Bag of Rhythms. Now that really, and that was, I moved to Bear Cage, upstairs, and that was really a big night. It was called Bag of Rhythms. I had a very pretentious byline about Coltrane and Mongo Santa Maria. Mongo Slapskins, he was a conga player. And so that was a good night. I was at a Bear Cage, and that lasted quite a few years.
Just going back to you DJing in Leicester.
Yeah.
Any other jazz DJs around at the same time from Leicester?
In a word, no. There was a lot of boys playing soul, a lot of guys playing soul, like classic groove. In fact, there wasn't a great deal, if truth be told. But then again, I was living like three lives. I was the whole student thing still. I was doing my own little thing, and then I was back and forth to London a lot, you know, going home to all days and that. But I know the boys, Derek and all that crew, we used to hire coaches and go to the all days. We used to go and see bands like Incognito, Level 42, Second Image, Blue Rondo. We used to go to a lot of all day just jazz dance gigs. We used to see people like George Power, Colin Curtis. We used to go to Rock City. And there was the Powerhouse in Birmingham. Yeah, I think it was called. But it was quite an exciting time, actually, truth be told. There didn't seem to be any boundaries to anything. And as I mentioned about Bag of Rhythms at Bear Cage, it helped to really put Leicester on the whole UK map as far as jazz is concerned. As I said, Straight No Chaser, we had articles in Straight No Chaser, which is just number 4, I think. And if you see, there's people like, it's one of the sessions I used to do. Used to have Carol Leeming and the Jazz Dance Boys, a lot of student friends, and a lot of people from town. So it was, I've forgotten the two brothers who used to do R&B. Chris, they used to be in Saquii, the band called Saquii. Chris and his brother, and obviously Stan Samuels and Tony Luby, and they used to come down. So they're all, they're soul boys, you know, and I played a mixture of stuff for them. And then at that time I had a posse of jazz dancers, and they were very young. They must have been about 17, and they didn't know what they wanted to do when they finished school. So they all ended up going to Northern School of Contemporary Dance, and I'm really proud of them, all of them. There was Poz, you know, Indy, who owns the Indy's hairdressers in town. It's his younger brother anyway, Poz, and Carl, now Kwesi Johnson, and there was Sarah Storer, Chanteau, Wesley, and Sue, and they all went to Northern School of Contemporary Dance, and they all ended up working all over the world, dance, television, Ballyrambert, English National Opera, all from Leicester. And so that's really what I see as one of the things that's driven me on as far as hoping to inspire people to go and do things. Maybe not in Leicester, but outside of Leicester, hopefully to try and do things in Leicester, but you know, it doesn't always work out that way. But they went off and made lives for themselves from this music, and I'm really, really proud of that. So then I started doing stuff for the Mission as well, and we started doing PAs, but that was at the very launch of all, basically Giles kept me in touch with what was happening in London. Giles, Snowboy, Kev Beadle, Patrick Forge, they basically sent me records, kept me in touch with the vibe.
What years was this then?
This must have been about 86, 87, 88, that sort of time when the magazine started. And then, I can't remember when Fresh started. I think that Fresh must have been the early 90s. Early 90s, and I was doing stuff for Fresh, but I'll come to And the whole acid jazz thing started, the whole Talking Loud thing. And luckily I was right in the centre of that because a lot of these guys I knew or grew up with them, and a lot of the new bands, because it came from being a retro scene, and also we had the rare groove scene. Myself and Jazz put on one of the first that I remember sort of warehouse parties at Spectrum. And I do remember quite vividly Mr. De Silva and Mr. Inman, Derek and Kim turning up with a box of records to tell me that they were playing. So it was quite amusing. So you know, it was good times. Myself and a guy called Jazz Loyal. Parallel to that, so many things going on with Rob Charles and Carol Leeming and Bo, and we got some funding from the council and decided that we were going to put gigs on. We were going to put big gigs on. There was no one else doing that. There was no Leicester Jazz House, or they were very small at the time. And we started with an organisation called Giant Steps, which basically took it to the next level. Yeah, it really took it to the next level more than anything else. And it included, we put on Jazz Warriors, Andy Shepherd. We put on a Latin festival, which included Roberto Pla, Robin Jones's band, about 4 or 5 other artists, international artists, and
These were all
a
like
snowboard.
different venues, or?
No, it was an all-dayer at the student arena at Leicester Poly, as was, or De Montfort as is now. And again, that was another level of gigs. Really, it was all packed out. We had people from all over the Midlands, people from from all ends of the country came to that. And then we started hooking up with promoters in Birmingham and Leeds and getting people to come down and do stuff. So there were big sessions, and through that whole, and that's where the connection with the Talking Loud thing comes in, because also that allowed us to put on stuff like K Creative and who are the other bands? Not Incognito. K Creative, Tammy Payne. We were involved with people like Young Disciples. When all that stuff was going on with Brand New Heavies and Jamiroquai, this is all music that was seeded by this whole retro scene as started, and people decided they were going to start making music because there was good musicians, you know. And K Creative, that was at Spectrum. Those were good nights, and that's one of the flyers I could find. And then I had a show on Fresh at the time. This must have been in the 90s, so called The Vibe, and I was known as Brother T, you know, whatever. And for legal purposes. And then we were known as the Foundation Crew, and that was myself, obviously Jay, Alps and Mange, and we helped to drive it on. We had bands like Galliano, you know, and all these people were involved with people like Paul Weller. There were musicians that played in other bands, but their heart and soul was in Incognito, and their heart and soul was in jazz, funk and Latin, and that was the core, more than anything else. Well, going back to radio, I had a show called Going Back to the Vibe, and that show lasted quite a long time during my whole. That was the first sort of pirate thing that I did, and it helped to open a lot of doors for me. And it was quite a strange time actually, because you had obviously soul, reggae, hip hop DJs. Obviously, when I first met Nilesh, DJ Yes, became firm friends, and he understood where I was coming from, because obviously he was playing a lot of breaks from music I was playing a lot of the originals for. So there was a real understanding of where we were coming from. We became very close friends, and obviously the reggae guys like Tappy and DJ Culture, and then there was obviously Ronnie, the big man in the room, Black Vinyl Magic, and then my little boy Simon used to come and sit in with me, schoolboy, used to come and sit in with me and see what I was doing. What are you doing? What are you doing? How'd you do that? And you know, and I'm really proud of that, because he went on obviously to do big things. And went through, you know, obviously his brother helped him a hell of a lot, you know, to hone his sort of DJ persona. But DJing in a club and DJing and broadcasting, two separate things. They take two separate skills. One, you work in a crowd, and with the other, you're putting over your personality, but it's more than that. For me, it's always been about the music, more than anything else. So I did Fresh for a number of years. I really, really enjoyed that. Made a lot of strides forward, and during that sort of early 90s period, we started something at Mosquito Coast, which again took us to the next level. We hooked up with the guys at the Jazz Cafe in London, myself and Nick Murphy and the Hussein brothers, who owned Mosquito Coast, and a guy called Mark as well. Mosquito Coast, Rum Runner, and with obviously the Jazz Cafe were booking international artists. A guy called Adrian Gibson was the manager there at the Mean Fiddler, and through that I ended up doing some big festivals and like Phoenix festivals, and had a residency at the Jazz Cafe. But then again, that's all out of Leicester, so we don't, you know, it's still relevant to a certain extent. But it helped put Leicester on the map, and obviously through Straight No Chaser as well, which was now becoming an international magazine I was writing for. It put us on the map. So we went from there, Mosquito Coast. We were doing things, Gil Scott Heron, Weldon Irving, Roy Ayres. There's a night called Karma. Roy Ayres, Maceo Parker, and if you don't know who Maceo is there'd be no James Brown without Maceo Parker, because he's the rhythm section, he's the man that drove the whole sound. And if there was no James Brown, there was no James Brown rhythm section, there'd be no break beats and there'd be no hip hop. So there you go, that's how important that man is. Right, okay. And obviously Roy Ayres, and without him there'd still be no hip hop. Right, so, the Mosquito Coast was a good time, because the whole acid jazz scene had kicked off. I had to do like a Saturday night, utilising all the stuff I'd learnt being a student DJ. So it was a general music, but the deal was, I'll do the Saturday night for you, if you let me do the Thursday nights. All right, do my own thing. And the night was called Queeker. We were doing 800 people over the door on a Thursday night.
What was that?
This is at Mosquito Coast, which is now Mosh. And I was getting people coming from, well, practically not all over the country, but all over the Midlands. So the whole thing took off. The radio thing really worked. Going back to the Mission days, we were doing a lot of PAs. Like we had a night called Sweet and Sour, and a lot of the guys who were on Fresh used to come down. We had Martine Giroux. We used to do all dayers. We had a night called Crisp, and that was at Mosquito Coast. And but I was also found myself on the bill at big house nights and raves, which was very strange. So I was doing stuff for Leroy, with the Formation Records in Idris. And I'd be the one at the bottom. They didn't quite understand what I was about, but you know, they put Tony, or Brother T, jazz breaks, that's all it said, right? Myself, and then people like Hardcore Trio would be on the bill, like Wavy and them guys who were really, on the hip hop front, who were really cutting edge at the time. And then I hooked up with, and that's how I first met, and then there was another night called Sponge I was involved with, and I was there as Brother T, and that's how I hooked up with Jose from Cafe Del Mar. And that opened another door for me, so I ended up doing stuff at Cafe Del Mar for a number of years, and that opened a completely different door. So I've been very lucky. I'm very blessed in that respect. Through the radio thing, I ended up doing stuff for Virgin. And then on radio front, and then around about mid-90s, the Mosquito Coast thing was doing very well. And then I ended up moving to America in Atlanta, and then working on a station called WCLK. So, but going back to the early days in Leicester, really, about doing, like I said, I was living two lives. I had the student life, but I also was doing stuff in town, so I had my foot in both camps. When I stopped being a student and was working in Leicester at the time, again, there were so many little clubs I was doing, a lot of them I've forgotten, you know, doing nights here, there and everywhere, but also I was able to fit into the people that were doing house nights or rave nights, and I was doing back rooms and stuff like that, doing the soul and jazz thing. Because of the fact that this whole vibe with Straight No Chaser was very open-minded, it included stuff that influenced house and that influenced soul, but it also included stuff to do with reggae and dub, but it also had stuff to do with Latin and Brazilian. So it covered the whole world music, covered the soul, it covered so many different things. And the thing that sticks in my mind more than anything else is the fact that when you were doing these kind of things, especially with the stuff I was doing on Fresh, it hit home to me that people either got it or they didn't. There was no middle ground. And the people that didn't were asking me why I was playing music or people didn't sing in English. And if you had to ask me that question, you didn't get it. Right, when I played Brazilian stuff, people spoke in Portuguese and salsa where people spoke in Spanish, and they didn't get it. I mean, Straight No Chaser culminated in helping to put Leicester on the map, as far as that was concerned. And this is an issue from, I think, it's 10th year anniversary. And everyone's on here, from Giles Peterson, Sam Booth, Slowboy, the Dig Posse from Leeds, guys from Germany, Andrew Missingham, James Lavelle, who started Mowax, my other little cousin DJ LaRouge, who worked with Cleveland Watkins on Project 23, Mark Gilmore from Canada, people who started Something Else, the production company that now runs BBC Radio, Jez Nelson, Chris Phillips, half of the DJs that were on Jazz FM. So it was, and luckily for me, I was able to be part of that whole family, Giles Peterson and Paul Bradshaw. And again, I see myself as lucky. And going back to, it's hard to classify it, but if you look at the byline on Straight No Chaser, it says interplanetary sounds, ancient to future, right? And obviously you spoke, I assume you're going to be speaking to Carol, or you've spoken to Carol, and she can put that into more perspective. Because again, she comes from that whole vibe of, and me and Carol actually have worked together over the years, and we've basically bounced off each other, and Rob Charles as well, and a guy called Bo, and it's been, like I said, I've managed to make inroads in Leicester, and I've helped to hopefully influence people musically. And then I made the move to the US, and Capital Mar, and then I made the move to the US, family reasons, work, so on and so forth. So ended up working on a jazz station, all through Straight No Chaser. Spent time with people like Curtis Mayfield, and you know, it was a lovely time.
Was that in the 90s, did you say?
That was the 90s. We actually had him as a student. We put him on as a student in the 80s, along with Gil Scott Heron as well as a Mosquito Coast Gil Scott Heron. Curtis Mayfield initially was 86, and then I met him again in 96 and interviewed him for Straight No Chaser, and by then he was a quadriplegic, and that was a very special time, interview-wise, spiritual. Just changed my life really, because he was talking to me about things that he'd written speeches for Martin Luther King. He explained about the civil rights movement, and it basically put me in touch with my spiritual side, you know, more than anything else. Not to denigrate it, it was a very special time in my life, I have to say. So, and then because of family stuff, I came back to the UK, became part of Giles Peterson's worldwide family, did some gigs in London, concentrated on family more than anything else. Then I went to do some stuff, work for Demon, you know, broadcasting wise. Concentrated on family and work for a lot of years. Then a few years ago, became involved with something called soulandjazz.com, which basically came out of my connection in Atlanta, helped to launch India Irie and Anthony David, their careers. Became involved with sort of black music in Atlanta and the Braxtons and Wamdu Project and came back, and through that, met a guy who was part of that scene. He was starting a worldwide radio network called soulandjazz.com, asked me if I wanted to get involved, and really from that, I've not really looked back from that. It's just taken me to a world stage, so I'm really pleased about that. Going back to Leicester now, guys like Mello, Tinny, Rakesh, John Costa, them guys started a thing called Bootleg Jazz, which I'm just doing advising on and helping with. We had our first jazz festival here a few months ago, or they had their first jazz festival here. So I was DJing out and helped them to get the main act, and we had a lot of local artists, and obviously Mike Soul's involved as well, and talented Mike Soul, keyboardist. And we had Peter Edwards Trio, one of Zara McFarlane's musicians, who's MOBO nominated, and that really is where it's going, really. I think the small satellite organisations, I remember that's how Giant Steps started. And I think they're going to go places with that and help to launch young artists. I mean, I'm in London all the time, and I go to Ronnie Scott's at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night. And I see all these young, and it's a jam session. After the main event, they have a jam session, and it's just wall to wall kids from Guildhall, Trinity, the Royal Academy who play there. Little Marcus Joseph, he's part of the whole Tomorrow's Warriors. I think he's a Trinity student. He's from Leicester, great saxophonist. Then you've got people like Mello, who were helping to break music-wise. And there's all young musicians that are coming from Leicester, but are part of the whole UK vibe. That was all started by the Jazz Warriors. And now they've got this thing called Tomorrow's Warriors, with Abram Wilson. And who sadly passed away. And he's helped to seed a lot of other stuff. So through Bootleg Jazz, hopefully the future in Leicester will be quite bright with a bit of luck. And I think it will, especially with the City of Culture bid coming up fairly soon. So yeah, some small acorns, you never know what might happen. But I never forget when I first got off the coach in '82, and I thought, where have I landed? But it's worked out all right. And I still love Leicester because I still live here.
What are you up to currently then?
Southernjazz.com really more than anything else. That's what I'm concentrating on, and obviously some production work. My little cousin is Timmy Magic from the Dream Team, and a few years ago we had a little production company thing going, which had a limited amount of success. And when the whole garage scene started, and involved people like Matt Cole and J. Cole, people like that. But now I'm involved with some people in Europe doing some stuff. The Sound of Everything, the label's called. And then helping to help Mello move forward. There's a record label, Richard Frost, Steve Baker and Mello got a thing called Mello Baku and the Friday People. And that's on a label called Sleek City, but we're doing stuff with that jazz. It's based in Derby. And that's jazz influenced. But what I'm hoping to, well, my ideal for the label that I'm doing in Europe is to find someone who was local, was a great musician, had a great vibe, was the whole package, and launch them on that label and then take it forward from them, you know. Because I've not DJed in a club in about 3 or 4 years, you know. Getting too old for that now, you know.
What's the current state of jazz in Leicester, do you think?
Well, you've got Leicester Jazz House, and they've always got their core crowd, and they've been doing all right, and that's fairly good. But I always see it, again, no disrespect, as the Radio 3 people. And it's very much a closed shop, you know, and there needs to be a lot more young blood coming into that. And they've done some really great things. And you've got people like Steve Beverly and their crew. They've got a radio show, and they're involved with bootleg as well. Sorry, but I think bootlegs actually they've got a brand, and it's all about brands now, as you know, with the Bay. You've got to appeal to young people, and to that they've got to find a way in. And I found previously it was about people were into their hip hop, and they thought, well, where are those breaks coming from? And that opened the whole world out to Roy Ayers, and that took them to Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis, and then that took them to people. Who did Songs of Innocence? Who was that? I've forgotten the guy's name now. But a lot of hip hop breaks. And then you think about Guru and Jazzmatazz, how that seeded so many people. And now you're finding you're getting some dubstep stuff that has a lot of sort of jazz influences, like keyboards. A few years ago, it was the drum and bass stuff that had that influence. Danny Buckham, the stuff he was doing was sampling a lot of jazz stuff. And I know Leroy, DJSS, has been trying to get his hands on my record collection for the last 20 years, and he ain't having it, right? So, to sample stuff. So, again, you've got to find a way in for people. They've got to think, yeah, I can find my reference point, and then it will just open up so many other doors. And it's trying to find that link. So in Leicester, I don't know, and that's the thing. You don't know what's coming around the corner. You really don't know what's coming around. You cannot predict what's going to happen. And that's the thing about music in the UK in general. You don't know what's going to come around the corner. You don't know what artist is going to pick up on something. You know, I found something on the net last night, a guy called John Crest, who I didn't even know about, based in Leicester, and he's got put an LP out on Bandcamp, and it's phenomenal. It's like a Latin sort of world music vibe, and it's just, I never heard of the guy. And I just saw a post from Carol Leeming, and I think, whoa, it's amazing stuff, called Carnival, I think. The important thing is you've got to have your foot in the club vibe, and you've got to have an outlet where people will hear this stuff on the radio, and people will not hear this stuff on the radio on mainstream terrestrial radio. They'll hear it on BBC Six. Giles has got his show. You got my little boy Benji B. He's doing his stuff on One Extra. Now he's moved to Radio 1 now, actually, but some stupid graveyard slot. And apart from that, the two key things is radio and clubs. And if you're not hearing them there, you're going to find it very difficult. You're going to find it difficult in a town that's the size of Leicester, with so many other things that are vying for competition. All the big clubs, we're in a spiralling down economy. People want people over the door, so they'll go for the most popular option. You know, so obviously R&B and that kind of vibe is big, so that's what you have DJ. So a promoter's not going to go out and say, I'm going to put on a jazz night. It's just not going to happen, because he's not going to get people over the door, because people don't have their reference points. And that's what I've always been driving for. And as you said, luckily for me, I was able to establish stuff here in Leicester, but overlap with Ronnie, Black Vinyl Magic, and them kind of guys doing the soul thing, and they understood where I was coming from on that. But then again, I had the other side, which was trying to bring that whole jazz vibe and the Aldea vibe and the jazz dancers, and you know. So I think it's all part of one big church, more than anything else. And you know, it's music goes in waves, and you really don't know what's coming. You really can't predict, because you think, oh, yeah, music's finished. It wasn't the same like in the old days. I don't think like that. I always look forward. Always. That's why I don't do oldies nights, if I can help it, because you always have to look forward.
Why in the world did you stick around in this way?
Oh, that's a good question. I thought there was work to do here, more than anything else. There was work to do here, but also London I always found very cliquey, and I was part of that set and I wasn't part of that set, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed not being part of that set, and I enjoyed being able to do my own thing on that vibe. And I also enjoyed the fact that there were satellite people in Leeds and Manchester, Dig Posse, or the Crib Manchester and Birmingham. We were all doing their own thing without being influenced by the London thing, and I liked that feeling. I really liked that feeling. I was able to do my own thing and in my own way without having to think that I was following something. Because my greatest enjoyment is trawling through record shops, now trawling through the net, finding music that hopefully no one, well, hopefully other people will find, but doing it in a different way, not thinking I'm hearing stuff on Six Music and I'm hearing what so-and-so is doing. Purposely, I don't even listen to Giles' show. I've not listened to it in years for that very reason.
An environment where you could grow.
Yeah.
And an environment where, I guess it wasn't vicious.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. That's a great thing. Everyone loved each other, man. And that's why I'm still friends with Nilesh and SS and them guys. And we're talking about 20, 25 years, you know. And that doesn't happen with DJs, trust me. You know, and that because we weren't in competition. We all understood each other. You know, we all respected each other's vibe. You know, we all respected each other's music. We all understood where we were coming from, and you know, and especially case in point, you know, the whole classic groove thing. The guys, you know, we've been mates for so many years with Paul and Derek, and we always take mickey out of each other, obviously, because we're all getting old now. But yeah, they understood me, I understood them, and they saw where I was coming from, and we're still DJing, so we're still broadcasting. So that tells you something.
What's the future for Tony Minvielle?
You know what, Leach, you're asking me a question that I haven't got an answer for. I take it day by day, just follow my nose, more than anything else. All I want to do is, my byline is bring quality music to people in any way, shape or form. Be that live, be that on vinyl, be that by any medium possible. Internet, radio, clubs, you know, that's the way forward. And hope to inspire people to do the same. And hopefully I've done that with a bit of luck. And we'll still continue to do that with a bit of luck.